Back to Coruscant. =RK=. Part 8. Council Chambers. Jedi Temple. Coruscant. The Jedi Temple had changed quite a bit in Obi-Wan's absence. On the outside it looked the same. From distance. Once he got closer, it became painfully obvious that the building had been extensively modified. The 4 towers surrounding the temple proper wore sensor dishes like demented crowns, and they were further altered to hold an AA emplacement. The same was true for the main building. Its walls wore 2 concentric circles of laser cannons. The same was true for the hangars, which were permanently sealed and shielded unless someone with the correct codes was approaching. It was sad to see the only home he knew being turned into an armed camp. However, after the second attack, not even the council could really refuse the Guard's offer of assistance in securing the building. Another change was with the vehicles in the hangar. While Obi-Wan parked the speeder he had borrowed from the Mandalorian, he had a great view of the 2 rows of LARTs that apparently replaced the vehicles usually used by the Jedi on Coruscant. Kenobi even glimpsed a pair of custom fighters in one corner, and he was pretty sure he saw at least few Jedi and clones working on them. When he disembarked, a squad of troopers came to greet and scan him, to confirm that he wasn't an imposter. If all that wasn't a clue enough, the way the temple felt, it was different. More tense, restless. The peace Obi-Wan associated with his home was absent. Perhaps it was fitting. He was coming to meet with the rest of the council, and a likely outcome was that he would be leaving soon after that, permanently at that. It couldn't be helped. While Obi-Wan would regret such an outcome, his marrying Satine wasn't something he could give up. On his way to the council chambers, Kenobi noticed even more changes. Many of the corridors were reinforced so they might survive a limited bombardment of the temple without collapsing, and at most junctions he saw installed armored blast doors that presumably could be used to contain or at least slow down any attacker. The Jedi Master passed by 3 squad-sized patrols too. Whoever was running the operation on the Gar side was obviously paranoid. While a part of Obi-Wan wanted to rebel against such an armed presence within the Jedi Temple itself, he couldn't do it. He had seen too much, been in too many battles to consider the almost insane security unnecessary. Perhaps it might be enough to dissuade the Confederacy from striking at the temple a 3rd time. Obi-Wan frowned. All those idle thoughts, he knew what they were, an attempt to distract himself from the most disturbing thing he saw in the corridors. It was the Jedi themselves. They were all tense, on edge. Kenobi could feel how anxious most of them were without even trying. More than a few of the knights he passed by in the halls were at least a little scared, and there was more than a hint of anger there. They were also pointedly avoiding him, even a Jedi he had thought a long-time friend. Finally Kenobi reached the council chambers, only to be stated down by 4 fully armed and armored temple guardians. "The council is expecting you." One of them spoke in an emotionless tone. Obi-Wan frowned. Those men. He couldn't feel even a shred of emotion coming from them. Not the sense of peace or serenity that he usually associated with most Jedi, nor the confusion and trepidation coming from the knights passed by moments ago. There was nothing, just the presence of 4 living beings. What had been happening to the council while he was away fighting a war? Hopefully he was going to get some answers now. Kenobi nodded to the guardians and went in. Obi-Wan walked to the center of the empty circle that took up most of the room, while looking who was present. To his left sat the snake-like Master Ransisis, whose head and face were hidden by long silver hair and beard. The old man was tapping the side of his chair with long, side-like nails that were no less dangerous despite looking quite fragile. Next to him sat the holographic image of Shark T, who looked anything but amused. Obi-Wan hoped that Del-Qatar at least called the Togruta to tell her about his marriage in person. To her left sat Master Yaddle, who looked like a toddler in her chair. She was of the same species as Yoda and still had hair, which she wore in a long braid. Or perhaps only the females of the species had it, who knew? While she and the Grand Master were far from the first Jedi to come from their mysterious homeworld, their kind was practically unknown to the galaxy at large. Besides Yoda himself, there were only 2 other masters present in the flesh. One was the short even Piel, who had an uncanny resemblance to the Grand Master's species, though the man had even larger Minot-like ears and wasn't green. The last Jedi in the room was Satine, who looked like a monster from the Outer Rim with his 2 large horns and what appeared to be a scowl permanently fixed on his face. Ki-Adi-Mundi and Plo Koon were also present, though they were en route to different battlefields after wrapping up things on Geonosis and experiencing a short R&R at Agarthob on the edge of the Inner Rim. Obi-Wan. Yoda greeted tiredly. The ancient Jedi Master looked all his 900 years today. This war and all the complications it brought wasn't good for the Grand Master. Master Yoda. Esteemed council members. Obi-Wan gave them a polite half-bow. Explain yourself, you will. Yoda ordered. I fell in love with Satine Kryze on an assignment to Mandalore more than a decade ago. While I didn't act on my feelings then, after we met again on my mission to observe General Vale and assist him in the negotiations with the Mandalorian government, I met her again, which was inevitable considering the post she held. Death Watch attacks complicated things. We reconnected. This time I acted on my feelings and we married just a few hours before a Sith fleet led by Grievous attacked Mandalore. And thus you became Mandalorian too. Adi-Mundi bobbed his huge head in barely restrained amusement. However, that wasn't a sentiment all masters shared. It's no surprise Skywalker went bad if this is the true face of his master. Teen grumbled. We all heard him. Master Obi-Wan Kenobi has willfully and knowingly spat on our code and traditions. I moved to have him expelled from the Order. Making such a call now, without hearing more, is premature at best. Master Kun tried to be the voice of reason. Whatever else Master Kenobi reports, it won't change the facts. He let his emotions compromise him and acted on them. What example would we make if we don't censure him? Shark T growled. So Del-Katar didn't tell her. She found second-hand and is now pissed. Probably feels betrayed too. Damn it, Vale. I'll abide by the Council's decision on the matter. Obi-Wan felt strangely calm. I made a choice and if my expulsion is the consequence then I'll accept it. May I ask a question? Ask you may, Yoda sighed. The Grand Master didn't look surprised by this turn of events. Just resigned. What will happen with Padawan Ahsoka Tano? She's losing a second master in 2 months. Obi-Wan asked. Skywalker's former Padawan? Master Rancice's voice had a barely audible hiss to it. Send her to the Agri Corps at least until the war ends. Considering what her teachers did, she needs time in peace to reflect on their mistakes and if she has it in her to become a proper Jedi. I second it, Teen snapped. We can't let the Sith-derived corruption spread further in the Order. Ahsoka Tano had no choice in who was to be her Jedi Master. Don't blame her for. Plo Koon raised in defense of his former pupil. You've taught her yourself. I understand you don't want to even think she's been learning bad habits or worse. Shark T interrupted him. The Corps will be the best and safest place for her. Or do you want risking Ahsoka falling to the dark side? Vale had been giving her an unhealthy amount of attention. What Vale did was cruff up beyond any reason where Shark T was concerned. That's the only thing Obi-Wan could think of as he stared at the unfolding debacle in shock. He opened his mouth to defend Ahsoka too, but thought better of it. Those who wanted her out of sight and out of mind weren't likely to listen. In fact, they might try using his defense of the girl against her. Call in the vote, Grand Master. The call has been made and seconded. T nodded grimly at Yoda. So it has been. Padawan, young Tano remained should. She'll make a good Jedi. Plo Koon nodded. I'm on the same opinion. Adi-Mundi added. Send her to the Corps, Rancice hissed in annoyance. Corps. Teen's response came in a flat, bored tone. Agri Corps. That's the best for Ahsoka. Shark T's tone had a finality to it. Corps. After this mess, she'll need time to clear up her head before continuing her training. PL voted. That left Master Yaddle. I believe that sending her to the Agri Corps would be a disservice to the girl. However, considering what is happening to the Order, it would be better that she is away until we find our way once again. Agri Corps. Good. Rancice nodded. Obi-Wan shook his head. Somehow he didn't believe it was going to be that simple. No one appeared interested in asking Ahsoka's opinion and Kenobi was pretty sure that she had other options. He wisely kept that thought to himself. The last thing this fire needed was someone adding an accelerant. Obi-Wan, before we vote about you, please tell us about Vale. What was he up to on Mandalore? Besides the obvious? Shark T grimaced when mentioning Del-Katar's name. What do you want me to say? Obi-Wan didn't take the bait. What he wanted was for this fast to be over so he could talk with Yoda and find out what the Criff had driven the Order in this madness. The truth. Becoming Mandalore. Did we harbor an enemy all those months? What do you know about his long-term plans concerning the Jedi and the Republic? Shaak Ti asked. He intends to prosecute the war to the best of his ability both as a Republic general and Mandalore. That at least was the truth. Obi-Wan was afraid to tell anything else, to share any of the suspicions he might have had, because there were at least 4 people in here who appeared ready to go after Vale. Kenobi had no illusions what would happen if the Jedi attacked him. And he dreaded if some misguided fool went after Bo-Katan, no matter the reason. A cold pit formed at the bottom of Obi-Wan's stomach. That's all? Perhaps he didn't share anything of importance with you after all. Shaak Ti sounded resigned. Do you have something to share, Obi-Wan? Adi-Mundi asked. Not really. He'll be of no help. Let's vote, Teen stated. Seconded. Piel and Rancisis spoke almost as one. The vote went the same way, though this time Master Yaddle had no reservations. Please hand us your lightsaber, Obi-Wan. The tiny woman spoke in regret. That's what happens when we let a Sith have a free reign. Master T sighed. I'm afraid this isn't going to be the end of it. If this is all? She asked, and when nothing was added she terminated the connection from her side. Obi-Wan pulled out his lightsaber and looked at it for a long moment. To simply give it away. It felt as if he was handing out a piece of his very being. Kenobi sighed in regret and strode up to Yoda, then fell on one knee so he could look the Grand Master in the eyes and gave him the saber. All this is a world, Obi-Wan. Yoda slowly got out of his chair and used the Force to retrieve his walking stick, which was leaning next to the furniture. More than one, Master Yoda. I would really like to know what just happened. Obi-Wan paused. What has been happening since I left for Geonosis? Come you will. Talk we will. Yoda muttered. Back to Coruscant. =RK equals. Part 9. Master Yoda's quarters. Jedi Temple. Coruscant. Yoda's rooms were less Spartan than one might expect. The Grand Master had collected a lot of little mementos and oddities in almost a millennia of life. It was something that Obi-Wan always found fascinating. There was so much history in that room, and almost everything on the many rafts and shelves covering the walls or secured in a handful of large chests in the back told interesting, often amusing tales. Unfortunately, today Kenobi had no eyes for the oddities. He watched concerned how Yoda slowly made his way to the bed and sat down with a tired sigh. Questions you have? Ask them you will. Answer I will. Yoda muttered. What the criff happened? Obi-Wan blurred out and helplessly waved around. Vale. Yoda grumbled. Vale? How did he manage this? Kenobi exclaimed. He was pretty sure Del-Qatar hasn't been criffing up with the Order lately. The man was simply too busy to have the time even if he wanted to. Master T. Yoda gave the much younger man a long-suffered look. Slept with her had. Knew about it, did you? Yes, I was aware. Obi-Wan stammered. This is the fallout? Now that he found hard to believe. He thought he knew Shaak Ti. If she was as pissed off as she seemed, it would be like her to try stabbing Del-Qatar a few times with her lightsaber. What Kenobi didn't expect was for her to throw him and Ahsoka on the pack of hungry crowd hounds that were the Conservatives. Damn it, Vale. How did this happen? Obi-Wan's tone was resigned. Master T, betrayed feels used. Blames Vale she does. Believes Right Winder was. The Conservatives join she has. Yoda's ears dropped. I noticed. Obi-Wan muttered. What I felt when I got back. How is the Order as a whole took that the recent changes? Divided we are. Confused, scared the Jedi are. Yoda paused. Angry. His small frame practically radiated regret. You know, even if you wanted to move against the Order, Vale wouldn't have done it now. The war is going to escalate even further and the Republic doesn't need another internal division right now. Kenobi didn't know how right he was. Believe his intent this was not. Yoda grumbled. Responsible he still is. Listen to reason the conservative Jedi refuse. Become Mandalore Vale has. Proven their fears he has. So did you. Yoda sent a disappointed look at Obi-Wan that made him feel like a little boy caught stealing sweets from the kitchens. Well, it was Yoda who caught him doing it that one time. I'm sorry, Master Yoda. However, I might regret the consequences of my actions and how they affect the Jedi Order. I don't regret marrying Satine. It was the right call for the two of us. Yet, causing further strife among the Jedi, the only family he had known until this last few weeks tore him up inside. Yoda grumbled quietly. Perhaps mistaken we were. Emotions. Unsure am I does as taught Master Teen do. The best interest of the Jedi he has. The code he follows. By traditions he swears. Yoda looked sad at the admission. Once I would have agreed. Now? I'm not sure if our traditions and reading of the code could be called wrong. What I can see is that they simply aren't right for all Jedi in the Order. That's something I've been tormented by for months now, torn between rigid tradition and a single understanding of the code, and what I've seen and experienced in the wider galaxy. Some might reach a different conclusion. I believe that's what's happening right now, at least in part. What I experienced out there, he pointed at the sky far above the ceiling of the room, is the simple fact that our code doesn't work so well when confronted by the outside world. Perhaps it's our understanding of it that is flawed. Or just the galaxy is too messed up. I don't know. Obi-Wan shrugged. Above politics we were. Stood aside galactic affairs we did. Best of intentions we had. Yoda muttered. A part of the galaxy we were. I'm not sure that the rest of the galaxy ever saw us that way. Obi-Wan interjected. No. Act we did. Command we took. The Clone Wars we fight. A part we are not. Yoda added. To the Senate we must go. The Grand Master's eyes suddenly widened and he looked disturbed. Vale's hearing should be starting soon. Obi-Wan added. Master Ta'il there will be. Speak he will. Yoda jumped from his low-placed bed and the force around them trembled as he used it to revitalize his ancient body. He's about to do something stupid, isn't he? Obi-Wan groaned. As if Vale wasn't enough. Ashe equals. Senate Chambers. Senate Building. Coruscant. This place looks much better than the last time. I muttered when we entered the place where the galaxy fate was decided on a daily basis. Supposedly at least. The lack of terrorists is refreshing. Palpatine snarked. We went in together, so the Chancellor could show his support for my cause. His large security detail fanned out and spread around our primary exit and we headed for Palpatine's platforms followed by the hulking figure of Masa Meda, the Vice Chair of the Senate. He was Palpatine's creature. The only thing I wasn't sure if that has always been the case or if it happened after Valorum had his vote of no confidence. It didn't really matter nowadays. Ameda was likely to be an ally for the time being and in the long term, I would lose if I played the political game against someone as established as Palpi and his cronies. That's why my bet was on the military. The chamber was already buzzing from thousands of beings talking and that sound raised up to crescendo once we boarded Palpatine's personal pod and ascended to the center of the room. A lot of senators jeered when they saw me but what sounded like an equal number actually cheered my presence. Even if he was going to take credit as the man who had the foresight to give me my commission in the GAR, Sidious had to chafe under sharing the limelight and even influence with me. That was something I was going to enjoy in private. Now it was time for a bloody circus. I suffered through the formalities and soon enough it was time to answer the Senate. The noise that followed was deafening, but soon enough it was clear who would be my first inquisitor for the day. It made sense really. A single pod raised up until it was on the same level as us and I had a great view of its occupants. 3 Cathar stood proudly in it. 2 large males flanking their senator, a lithe, furious-looking female. They all wore traditional garb. Grey suits with a crimson sash across their chest held in place by golden brooch shaped like a lion, well Cathar head. Considering that the Mandalorians drove their species to near extinction during the first war between my people and the Republic, it made sense that the Cathar would be first to raise in opposition to my new title. On the other hand, I've fought besides their people when multiple clans joined us against the Republic after Imperial intelligence rescued a political prisoner held on Belsavis for decades by Sis. The males were of the subspecies that were practically bipedal lions complete with manes, white-furred in their case. They looked more than mean enough to fit their roles as bodyguards. The senator on the other hand had a short golden fur and the long hair tied up in a braid that went well past her waist. Chancellor Palpatine. The senator gave him a respectful blow. Mandalore. She bared her teeth in a clear threat. Yeah, certainly not a fan. Senator. I'm afraid we aren't acquainted. I spoke calmly, doing my best to present myself as a reasonable fella. I'm Senator Silvaris, Mandalore. She introduced herself, putting emphasis on my new title. While it was obvious what she was doing, it didn't make it any less effective. I've hoped that after their civil war the Mandalorians finally learned their lesson and were finally ready to turn another page. I'm saddened to see them going back to their old, murderous ways. How long would it be before the Republic will have to fight the Mandalorians again? And this time it will be with almost perfect intelligence, isn't this true, General? She glared daggers at me. Almost everyone from the Outer Rim that had remained loyal to the Republic instead joining the Confederacy were shouting their support. An unintended consequence of me becoming Mandalore was going to be a stiffening support for the Sis among all their members that had clashed with my people in the past. If I have anything to say about it, never. I spoke aloud. We've all spent too much time wasting precious lives and resources trying to kill each other in the past. And that's what the conflict between Mandalore and the Republic is, an artifact of a bygone era. My people didn't suddenly change yesterday or last week. They didn't change just because I hold the title of Mandalore. I gave the Senate a reassuring smile and waved a hand to encompass the chamber. The simple truth is that we have no issues with the Republic. No reason whatsoever to wage war against it. In fact, one of the reasons why I'm here in my official capacity as Mandalore is to seek a military alliance against the Confederacy, the madmen who are our real enemy. An enemy to the Republic and Mandalore both. Nice, empty words. Sylvaris nodded. Why should we believe a Mandalore? It hasn't worked so well in the past. In the past the Republic and Mandalore were long-standing enemies. Yet, it's been a long time since a state of peace had reigned between our nation. My people fought a civil war against what you fear, maniacs like the now-defunct Death Watch who would have seen the galaxy burn for their own gain. We fought them just a few weeks ago, them and their backers in the Confederacy. While we paid a steep price in both Mandalorian lives and those of our allies in the Republic who fought side by side with us, we won again and put a stop of that nonsense, hopefully permanently this time. My smile grew. In fact, that's one of the primary reasons why I seek an alliance with the Republic. Fighting together against a common foe like the Confederacy will make what you fear even less likely than it's today. Honorable warriors don't one day simply turn around and stab the people they fought beside in the back. There would be no honor, no glory in such an act. Not to mention the little part that doing so would make no sense for Mandalore as a whole. I see. What about your conflict of interests? You're Mandalore now. You can't be one of the highest-ranking generals in the Republic military at the same time. From your words it's clear you'll do what's best for Mandalore and its people. That's not necessarily what's best for any Republic soldiers you might command in the time or in the interests of the Republic. The Cathar woman was undaunted. What's more, you could clearly hear the conviction ringing in her every word. If I may field that question? Palpatine interjected and offered Sylvaris his best grandfatherly smile. I wondered if he had it patented. That exact issue wasn't lost to the good general, nor to me or the officers in the Grand Army. In fact, at first opportunity, General Vale approached me about the problem. Senator Sylvaris, you can rest assured that we view the issue as important. In fact, we even reached a solution that I hope will allay your fears. What is that solution? Is Mandalore resigning from the Grand Army? Sylvaris asked hopefully. While the offer was made, me and Republic High Command refused it. Now Palpi looked severe. Just to cover RSS, I actually made such an offer to Valentra from the Chancellor's office shortly before we had to come here. Tila wasn't amused. This time both sides were equally outraged. Sylvaris' allies were furious that my so-called resignation offer hadn't been accepted and that I hadn't been kicked out of the army as soon as I made it. Those who wanted the Republic to have as many allies as it could get were pissed off at the very idea that the GAR might lose one of its most effective commanders. All the commotion irritated Ameda a lot. It was part of his job to keep things in the chambers more or less civil. It took him a few minutes to have the noise down to just a dull roar so Palpatine could be heard. Precisely because the issues you raised, Senator Sylvaris, General Vale will no longer be in command of all Republic combat units. The Chancellor used the opportunity to make her share the blame for everything that might happen once I wasn't holding my current position and responsibilities. If things went bad during the Sis offensive, Palpi would need scapegoats, and guess who volunteered to shoulder the blame? I was sure that he'll be using the next month to convince the public that this whole thing was the brainchild of certain senators who conveniently were causing him problems. And when something goes wrong, which was a given, He was going to remove some of the opposition within the Senate after hanging the responsibility for any setbacks on their insistence that I couldn't keep my current job. Considering that this maneuver was likely to keep my hide out of at least some political complications down the line, I wished Palpy luck. It also reinforced the fact that I shouldn't go against him in the political arena. Doing so would be unwise. That's a relief, Chancellor. Silvaris relaxed a bit. Considering General Vale's change of status and some issues that were brought to my attention concerning problems coordinating command between the Grand Army and some of our forces that aren't technically part of the Republic Army, I'll likely announce the creation of a unified command structure between the GAR, Mandalore and the various armed forces of systems like Corellia. The primary goal will integration of our armies and navies to better fight this war and resolving any issues about who is supposed to be in command long before our boys and girls could reach the front lines. As a pilot command under that initiative, we'll be creating a single integrated unit under the command of General Vale which will include Republic, Corellian and Mandalorian forces. Lessons learned after the first months of operations will be then used to speed integration of our militaries and figure better how to more efficiently expand the UCS. Palpy smiled. And no, the UCS moniker won't be the final name of that initiative. It's simply less of a mouthful than the rest that were proposed. I'll give Palpy that, even without using the Force, the man was damn charismatic. When he spoke, the senators listened, even if at least half of them were quite furious by what he was actually telling them. I simply couldn't pull something like that off without leaning on the Force to figure out what I should be saying, at least when speaking to civilians or politicians. Ameda was quite busy once again and Silvaris was busy giving us both death stares. Palpatine simply gave her an apologetic shrug. Before Ameda could restore order, our attention was caught by a pod-breaking protocol and heading our way. That made the senators quiet down so they could see and hear what the cruff was happening. I frowned when I saw someone clad in Jedi robes approaching. In fact, he wasn't alone. There was a short being next to him that was hidden by the bulk of the pod and his companion due to the angle of approach. For a moment I thought it was Yoda, but the color was wrong despite the superficial resemblance. I stretched my perception through the Force and frowned. They were quite powerful for Jedi of this era. Council members was my guess, though I haven't met them. I racked my brain to place names to their faces. I've went over what was publicly accessible about the Order soon after I found myself in this time, but some details had slipped my mind as not too important. Like council members that were more or less non-entities. Apparently that had been mistake that might very well be biting me on the ass right about now. Chancellor Palpatine. The tall Jedi spoke in a booming voice and bowed. I'm sorry to interrupt these proceedings, however the Jedi Council has issues that have to do with the subject in this hearing. I regret the fact we were unable to give you more warning. Master Teen and Master PL, was it? Palpatine looked at the Jedi. Both as a Chancellor and an old friend of the Jedi, I always have time for your issues. He showed just the right amount of concern and surprise in his voice and expression. I'm glad to hear it, Chancellor. Teen, the taller, horned one nodded. For some time, the Jedi Council has had concerns about General Vale. I heard your outrage. He turned around and looked at the senators. How betrayed you feel when Vale chose to seize power and become Mandalore? The Jedi Master glared at me. I'll ask you something. Why are you surprised? Some of us saw a thing like this coming, yet our warnings fell on deaf ears, because it was convenient at the time. Ta'il took a deep breath and pointed an accusing finger at my chest. Right here for all of you to see stands a Dark Lord of the Sith. One who thousands of years ago engineered the fall of the old Republic as Darth Vale. I don't know what Sith sorcery allows him to stand here today so he could spread his lies and corruption in an age we all believed, no hope that the Sith were gone for good. The good news was that Palpy was glaring at the Jedi and I was pretty sure if this was a setup, it wasn't one of his doing. Not when Sidious stood at an arm's length from me. Unless he has lost all his marbles, the Chancellor couldn't know how dangerous I truly was and wouldn't engineer such a public confrontation with him in the epicenter of it. However, the Senate was another matter. Those pissed off that I had given the Mandalorians a leader in myself and fearing the ghosts of an ascendant Mandalore behind me. They were listening. Ameda tried to silence the Jedi, but a glare added by a subtle pulse of the Force kept him quiet. Such a blatant use of Force powers here and now by the Jedi of all people put me on edge. I was suddenly glad to have my lightsaber on me. Wearing an armor with integrated shields was good thing too, just in case the Jedi went crazy. Well, crazier. At least if things didn't go too badly, they were going to give me and Palpatine more than enough rope to hang them with it and make the Jedi Order as a whole non-entity. Because of this man's corrupting influence, just a short time ago the Jedi Council was forced to expel one of our own. A Jedi Master who was an example for us all became corrupted in just a few months of interaction with this Sith and forced our hand. Tuil pointed at me again. He almost succeeded in corrupting a second Jedi Master too. If he did that a third time I might just give in the temptation to grab his hand and break that finger, consequences be damned. Tuil looked at the Chancellor, then at Ameda, before his eyes swept over the chamber. If he did that, we should ask ourselves who else he has corrupted. Who has he deceived? Who will be his next victim? And I can promise you, if Delcatar Vale isn't removed from power right here and now, we'll all live to regret it. How long before the democracy was sworn to protect is replaced by a new Sith Empire with him in charge? How long before he twists and corrupts the Republic in something that even the monsters running the Confederacy will find terrible to behold? I couldn't help it and started laughing. Me, a Krithing Emperor and having to do the bloody job? No thanks. Well, whatever Tuil and Piel was it, expected, me laughing my ass off for the whole Senate to see wasn't it? Even Palpatine gave me one glance and snorted. You had me going there for a moment, I muttered before laughing again. Tuil glared at me. Funny is it? Recently. For all we know, you were the one behind Dooku's fall and the Confederacy and are merely playing us against each other for your own sick amusement. Piel spoke for the first time. Curiously, the Senate was actually silent this time. This kind of show wasn't something they saw every day. Not between Jedi and Sith. Nowadays that was the stuff of legends. Dooku was a Jedi, someone shouted. How do we know he ever truly left? Now, that accusation ignited the crowd and everyone began shouting. The commotion was so big and my attention was centered on the Jedi Masters in front of me that I didn't notice the approach of yet another pod, this one holding Yoda and Obi-Wan. When they reached us, earning themselves glares from Tuil, the noise was so loud that there was no way in hell we could hear each other even if we were shouting. Well, criff that. I took a deep breath and gathered the force around me, making the Jedi Masters take a wary step back. Silence. I screamed and my voice echoed around the chamber. Now if we can all act as grown-ups, it will be appreciated. That's me, the consummate politician. Master Yoda. Palpatine beamed at the tiny Jedi. I hope you might shed some light over, well this. He waved at Tuil and Piel. Am I to understand that they speak for the Jedi Order, because the timing of your arrival indicates otherwise? Yoda looked quite disgruntled and appeared to want to be anywhere but here. I almost sympathized to the little fella. A big feature in the Sith Empire was if one of your subordinates criffed up publicly in such a fashion, you could force choke them or something then and there, thus removing the headache permanently. The Jedi Council split ears. Half supports this. Yoda reluctantly pointed at Tuil. Expelled Master Obi-Wan Kenobi was not totally unexpected but still quite a dumb move. Unfortunately it was obviously where Tuil and company was coming from and there was probably no way to appease them without putting myself in Jedi custody to spend the rest of my life under close guard. That or simply died where I stood. Naturally, I wasn't going to oblige them. What I might have to do is to move against the order myself and Yoda lost the obvious power struggle or the likes of Tuil forced my hand. Such an outcome was going to be ugly and it was the last thing we needed right now when we should be preparing for the inevitable Sith onslaught. I see. Palpatine trailed off. I was sure he was leading a valiant fight not to fall down laughing his ass off. Am I to understand that the Jedi Council is divided and you thought it was a good idea to bring that out here for everyone to see? And accusing a Republic general with exemplary record, not to mention a foreign political leader of what amounts to treason too. The Chancellor's face became a severe mask. Master Tuil, Master Piel, I hope you have proof. Solid one. What a solid proof would be, Chancellor? Senator Silvaris asked. The Jedi Masters are correct. We all apparently forgot what Mandalore truly is. I wonder if it simply slipped our minds because we fixated on his positions as a general and Mandalorian leader or how they put it, Sith sorcery? After all we all know he has certain powers. Some of us were right here in this building when he used them against the terrorists and Confederacy droids who took us hostage. Many of us died that day. Now I have to wonder how much of that was inevitable, how many died not because we couldn't be saved thanks to the Confederacy planning their attack well enough but because Vale wanted them to die. The Cathar shouted her accusation at me. This time there was no easy way to calm down the senators. Sylvaris earned herself an approving nod from Tuil and a disappointed look from Palpatine. The Chancellor shook his head and went next to Ameda so he could shout something in the man's ear. The large alien nodded and began fiddling with a mechanism built in his ceremonial staff. A deafening gong sounded, followed by a loud announcement: "The Senate will be in recess until 6 o'clock this evening." I repeat, the Senate will be in recess until 6 o'clock in the evening. I looked at Palpatine, who waved helplessly at the chamber around us and activated the recall function of our pod. He waved for Yoda and Kenobi to follow us and ignored the people in the other two pods. As cluster criffs go, this was a new experience. If this what democracy, republic-style meant, I might just as well ignore my plans for reforming the whole criffing thing. That left me with figuring out who to use as a controllable emperor, because the last thing I wanted was the never-sufficiently criffing job. If I could trust Palpy not to stab me in the back or, well, create his own quagmire of an empire, I might have been tempted in keeping him around. The moment we were out of the chambers, the noise cut down significantly. At the same time a quite worried security detail fell in place around us. "If you haven't, call in for reinforcements. This might get yet more ugly," I advised the clone in charge of keeping Palpy in one piece. "Already done, sir. Just so you know, General, most of us don't believe that." He waved helplessly at the madhouse behind us. "I know." I gave him a reassuring nod. "Well, this didn't go according to plan." "You think?" Palpatine shot back in an out-of-character sarcastic tone. For just a moment I glimpsed a combination of glee and fury coming from the other Sith, then his shields were firmly in place before Obi-Wan and Yoda could come behind us and sense anything beyond the mixed emotions of the senators, who were growing even more frantic. A different galaxy. =RK=. Part 1. Chancellor's Office. Senate Building. Coruscant. Palpatine made his way to his comfortable chair and crashed into it. To think things were finally looking up just a tiny bit, before those never sufficiently damned idiots. Jedi. He should have known they would find a way to criff everything up. Speaking about them. The Chancellor leveled a flat stare at the pair that walked in after Vale. "Master Yoda, Master Kenobi." Despite all his experience in politics and durasteel self-control, keeping his tone clipped and curt was all he could do while struggling with overwhelming need to fry the closest Jedi with Sith lighting. "An explanation is in order. A good one." "What he said?" The general nodded and crossed his arms, while giving a pointed look at the Jedi. "It's your fault." Kenobi pointed at Vale. "How did you figure that out?" "Some of your people have been on my case ever since Wind lost it and almost attacked me while I was risking my life saving Jedi lives. Moments like these make me wonder why I bothered." The other Sith grumbled. Well, besides the good PR, Palpatine had to wonder the same thing. Letting the idiots die would have prevented so much headaches. "Shark T. Apparently she believes that you seduced her, slept with her and then discarded her for power and Mandalorian bride." Obi-Wan shot back. "You slept with a Jedi Master?" Palpatine asked. A trace of indignation crept in his voice. "What the griff?" Sidious had been stuck playing the kind old man, trying his best to keep the Republic from imploding thanks to idiot senators, and seldom had the opportunity to go out and have a bit of fun, which consisted mostly of removing complications to his plan. Vale on the other hand had all the fun, leading battles, apparently literally criffing up the Jedi and enjoying every moment of it. Sidious had seldom loathed someone in his life as much as Vale and the Jedi in general right now. He barely bit off a snarl and had to make a valiant effort not to reveal his nature as a Sith in front of the Jedi's Grand Master. At this moment, Sidious had no trouble believing that Vale was a Sith of old and because of it, hated both the man and Bane. The founder of his Sith order had taught his apprentice that the old Sith were short-sighted fools. That stealth and keeping a low profile would make the Banites ultimately triumph and see the Jedi crushed once and for all. And yet, Vale stood right here, proudly proclaiming his status for all the galaxy to see. And no one but the Jedi appeared to care. By the Force, Because of that revelation, the Jedi were too busy tearing themselves apart. It would be hilarious if it wasn't the danger that they just might bring down Palpatine's ambitions for a galactic empire along with the Republic if something wasn't done about the fools. If he only knew all it took was revealing his nature, Sidious would have been tempted to do it himself. Yet, now it wasn't the time nor the place for such a stunt. Doing something this audacious might just be one push too many and lead to the Republic flying apart at the worst possible moment. I'm afraid I missed that. This revelation came in as a shock. Palpatine trailed off. He hadn't been paying attention for a bit. That's one way to put it. Vale shrugged. If it was my intention to seduce and corrupt Master T as you put it, I wouldn't have criffed it up. She would either be turned or dead. What happened about the no attachment part your conservatives are preaching? There's nothing forbidding sex in your rules or the Jedi Code. Just attachments. The general snipped back. Palpatine raised both eyebrows at that idea and gave the Jedi a speculative look. Did the Jedi of all people had more fun than him too? He dismissed the idea. They wouldn't have been able to keep it low profile, right? Delcatar, you of all people should know something about women. I've read about your exploits back in the day. Obi-Wan stated flatly. Sleeping with women after they've tried to kill you or before you try to kill each other isn't exactly the greatest endorsement in that regard. On the other hand, having lots of sex with many different women kinda made up at least in part for dealing with copious amounts of deranged lunatics on daily basis. I hope the latter was done for when I found myself in the future, but you Jedi took up the slack after just a few months of peace and quiet. Vale shook his head. Obi-Wan gave out a long-suffered sigh. Criff it all, sex was overrated for a Sith. Right? Sidious shook his head and wondered how this surreal conversation started. He was sure the Jedi were to blame. Somehow. No matter how interesting this topic is, I believe we aren't here to discuss the general's sex life. Even if it's the reason for this debacle. Palpatine grumbled. Don't look at me. It's not my fault the Jedi couldn't handle their affairs as an adult. Shakti trying to skewer me with her lightsabers next time we meet would have been perfectly understandable. If what you insinuate is true and she's to blame for practically pushing the Order to splinter, that's a big no-no in a time of war. Obviously you have a long history with women trying to kill you. I wonder why. Obi-Wan snarked. No. Sidious grunted. He wasn't even going to think about it. It was irrelevant with how many Jedi or Sith Vale had slept. The important thing was that the Jedi obviously had access to records he lacked and they were convinced that Delcatar Vale was indeed a Sith of old, which changed things. And while thinking about the past, Criff Bane too. So much for the superiority of the Banites when all it took for the Jedi to be marginalized and on the way to extinction was a single one of the old Sith reappearing. Palpatine took a deep breath and focused. I've obviously gotten one shock too many today, because my thoughts are drifting. Might you be so kind to clear up a few things for me? The Chancellor asked sweetly. First, you believe that the good general is really a Sith from the time of the Great War that happened almost 4,000 years ago? That he is. 4,000 years old and he's still able to cause trouble for everyone. Obi-Wan grumbled. I aim to please. Besides, it's not like you have a reason to complain. If it wasn't for me pointing out some truths, you would still be single and brood worse than Skywalker. Kenobi let out a long-suffered sigh as if to say, you see what I have to deal with? Good to know. Second, am I to understand that the corruption Masters Tuil and Piel talked about was that the general slept with an adult woman and then proceeded to aid you in marrying Duchess Satine Kryze? And before it slips my mind, congratulations for your marriages. Palpatine waved at Vale and Kenobi. I think you have covered it, Chancellor. Unless I'm mistaken? The general looked at Yoda, who stood slumped over his cane. True that is. You betrayed her, Master T believes. Convinced your actions sinister, she is. Threat to the Jedi, she sees you. The Grand Master spoke quietly. From where Sidious stood, Shakti was correct. Vale's very existence was tearing the Order apart and the foolish woman was unwittingly helping him. Palpatine would applaud her under different circumstances. Perhaps even trying to recruit her. However, with a woman far away on Kamino and he himself being stuck on Coruscant dealing with an ever-increasing amount of idiocy, that was simply out of the question for the time being. Still, He was going to keep her in mind in case Master T didn't piss off Vale enough with her meddlesome ways that disposes of her if he met her before Sidious got the chance. Master Yoda, I know that my words and tone aren't fit for someone in my position, but I have to ask. What the criff is wrong with you people? Jedi Masters coming in front of the full Senate and accusing one of the best generals the Republic has in the middle of a war for her very survival of what amounts to high treason. Because he slept with an adult woman even if she's a Jedi Master. Oh yes, the general helped another Jedi Master marry. That's so sinister and corrupting I'm at loss for words. Have you people lost your criffing minds? Palpatine stood up and shouted. Criff it all. At this rate he was going to reveal himself as a Sith before the hour was out. I've been wondering the same. Vale had the temerity to be amused by the whole mess, making Palpatine loathe him even more if that was physically possible. Emotions. Attachments. Path to the dark side they are. The conservative Jedi stand against it. Corrupting the Order Vale is, they believe. Luring Jedi to the dark side they see him. The death of the Order they fear. Desperate they are. Yoda explained. At any other time, Sidious would be cheering. A big faction of the Jedi getting desperate, criffing everything up and forcing the Gar to step up and purge them on the eve of the Confederacy coming to win the war with an armada or two was the worst timing ever. It was sheer madness. Then again Jedi. Why was he surprised? Calm down, look at the situation from the bright side, Palpatine thought. Once the substance behind the Jedi's accusations became public, something he would ensure happened later today, the Order was going to be finished sooner rather than later. Plan. He needed plan. Figure out how to prevent the situation from further blowing in everyone's faces if at all possible, and once the Jedi were out of sight have a chat with Vale about a contingency plan for purging the Order, rebuilding Gar officer corps while keeping morale up before the Sith onslaught hit. The Sith Lord had the sneaking suspicion that no matter what he tried the Jedi were going to criff things up even more spectacularly and force his hand. He almost laughed. Here they were, two Sith Lords conspiring how to keep the Jedi from committing a collective suicide. The Force sure had a twisted sense of humor. This madness ends now. Palpatine slammed a fist into his desk. Master Yoda, what exactly is the situation within the Jedi Order? How many of you support the agenda of Masters Ta'il and Piel? The answer of that question was hopefully not too many. What was even more concerning was how many senators allied to that infuriating Cathar woman were going to listen to those two lunatics. They were going to be a huge headache, and Palpatine was determined to place any setback caused by the Separatists squarely on their shoulders, then hang them all with them. He would tremendously enjoy doing so, provided that the Republic was still standing and he was still a Chancellor when the dust settled. It was unfortunately that various fools made that more and more unlikely lately. Evenly divided the Order is. Things worse Master T did. Yoda glared at Vale, who shrugged. You can't simply order them to cease and desist until the war is over, can you? Palpatine sighed. Of course not, criffing Jedi. Yoda simply shook his head. Master Yoda, should I be watching my back for Jedi assassins? All humor was gone from Vale's faces. You're aware what happened the last time. I let my grudge go because the Jedi Order I knew had been destroyed a long time ago. If Jedi-led assassin come after me, or even worse, anywhere near my wife, there will be consequences. The cold fury emanating from Vale made it crystal clear what consequences he had in mind, and Palpatine cursed silently. Under any other circumstances, he would have taken that statement to arrange something and blame it on the Jedi. Now he had to worry what the idiots might do without any prompting from his corner. Why did he want to become Chancellor and later Emperor? Sidious wondered. Because right then and there the ultimate power he would wield if his plan succeeded didn't seem worth it. This time Palpatine was paying attention and saw how Obi-Wan winced at Vale's words. From what Sidious gathered, Darth Vale had been married and his wife assassinated, though his records were ambiguous on the details. Now knowing that the Jedi were apparently to blame, put things into perspective. It also indicated that whatever was Vale's long game, making sure that the Jedi weren't around for it was a given. What Palpatine doubted was that the other Sith had planned for the fools coming apart this soon and in such a spectacular fashion. Well, it wasn't like the Jedi weren't surprising Sidious either. That's enough accusations, gentlemen. I don't care who slept with whom or why. What I want to know is how we prevent this madness from crippling the Republic. Palpatine decided it was high time to stop all this bickering and find a solution. The Senate will be back in session in just a few short hours and we need solutions. Chancellor, how much support do you enjoy in the Senate right now? Would it be enough when combined with Amidala and Mothma's little clique and Corellian support to keep Sylvari's cronies from winning any vote they might force? Vale asked. So his meeting last night had been productive. That was good for the time being. We should have the support of at least 2/3 of the Senate at best. Some of the new senators are still wild cards and it's anyone's guess how they would vote after the earlier commotion, Palpatine said after thinking about it for a few seconds. They still don't know about the intelligence reports, do they? A thin smile appeared on the general's face. They shouldn't. Unless someone in Oni or Sib talked, in which case I'll make personally sure they get what's coming for them. Palpatine smiled back. It wasn't a nice smile. What intelligence? Obi-Wan asked warily. You know that Sis offensive, we all know it's coming soon? Vale asked. Obviously not enough about it. Kenobi deadpanned. Intel finally got reasonably accurate estimates. The general cited the conservative numbers, making Obi-Wan groan. I believe you see why I'm so upset. Palpatine grumbled and received a nod from Kenobi. Some will find the existence and contents of those reports convenient, Obi-Wan cautioned. And I find this Jedi-created debacle's very existence and timing highly inconvenient. Palpatine shot back.